Hello, I'm Robert Thiemann. I'm the founder and director of Frame. Welcome to today's workshop with Workplace Solutions. Today's workshop is taking place in the context of a design challenge that we organized together with Orgatec, the leading trade fair for the workplace. The theme of the challenge is the Agile Workplace 2.0. I think everybody who's joining now is aware of what agility is and what agility in the workplace is and could be. We could speak about agility in terms of furniture and spaces being flexible. We could speak about agility regarding the flexibility of people, and maybe it should be a mix of both. In any case, the challenge is to find out what the next level of agility in the workplace is. We set out this design challenge in October last year. We received numerous submissions, and then we selected 10 finalists from all over the globe. And we invited these finalists to the Frame Awards Festival that took place in February this year. There they could present their ideas to a jury, and that resulted in 3 finalists. And the finalists are Soft Bodies, HOK, and Workplace Solutions. And Soft Bodies and HOK already had their workshop that took place a couple of weeks ago. And the idea of those workshops is to further develop the initial concept together with some experts. So each of the finalists could choose a couple experts that they wanted to work with. We had this workshop, and then the last stage of the design challenge is to further develop the initial concept for it then to be presented live and hopefully in person in October at Orgatec Trade Fair. So what do we have for you today? We will have, after my introduction, I'm going to share my screen with you. After this introduction, we will have a presentation by Workplace Solutions from Poland, presenting their initial idea, but this initial idea was conceived at the end of last year and presented in February. And yes, of course, we all know what happened after that. COVID-19 happened, came upon us, and the world changed dramatically. And especially the way we work changed dramatically. And this has prompted Workplace Solutions to further develop their initial concept already. And today they will present the latest version of their concept. Then they will go into a Q&A with experts. We have 2 experts today, Beatriz Arantes of Steelcase and Ninela Ivanova of RCA, and both will answer 1 question. And after that, there will be a conversation between Workplace Solutions, the experts, and hopefully also you. You're invited to submit your question using the Q&A button at the bottom of the Zoom menu. And what's more, Workplace Solutions also has a question for you. And you could answer that question live in the session, but you could also answer it later on by sending them an email. In any case, we're about to launch with a presentation by Workplace Solutions that I would like to present to you. We have here Dominika Zielinska, and she's the head of architecture and co-owner. We have Alexandra Piotrkovic, she is interior and service designer. And we have for you Ula Kutz, and she is a strategic designer at Workplace Solutions. So let me give the stage to you, team. I don't know who is willing to take the mic, take the stage, but you have prepared a presentation. Please go ahead.
So, hi everybody, it's really nice to have you here, and thank you, Robert, for having us, and of course our experts, Ninela and Beatriz. And as you already know, we are WorkSpace, and our approach to our work is an amalgamation of the elements listed here. So we start with research, analysis, strategy, and design. And today, we were supposed to show you our vision for Agile WorkSpace 2.0. But we have a question. Is this a rhythm of Agile? We think we should double the tempo to 4.0. And probably you think why? Because we've already developed 3 generations of Agile workspaces for our clients. And today, we will present the 4th approach, where this is our dance floor with sailing, grid, and moving walls, which provide flexibility of space, where we can add flexible furniture setups and flexible dancers with their daily tasks and routines. Sounds perfect? We're not so sure that it's so perfect. So let's face reality. Being human can be hard. When making a decision is a struggle, and probably you recognize this kind of situation. Or this, when you can't figure it out. Or even this, when it's really hard to follow along. And sometimes it's really too much effort to decide, and to figure out. And at the end of the day, many of us, we're just depleted. So let's make work human again. Can you see or feel the difference between those pictures? It's kind of easy. And how about now? And we believe that deep in our guts as humans, we really know what we need to concentrate or be creative. But we need to practice our self-awareness. So tell me again, what is your preference on the Kelvin scale? Or which temperature is the most ideal for you? Yes, units can be complicated. And how about now? We asked our teammates, using this matrix, what they require to concentrate. And guess what? Yes, the results are all across the spectrum. But probably we all know that one size does not fit all. And that's the very basic evidence of it. And that's me. And this was a quick example of how we can build our self-awareness. And instead of numbers, we can use our superpowers, like our ability to sense moods and make intuitive choices. And at the same time, we believe that we should create our own habits and celebrate routines, both at work and in life. And of course, that is, if we want to maintain our effectiveness and happiness, primarily as humans before employees. So let's get back to our perfect, flexible, agile workspace 4.0, where hour by hour, you have to struggle with so many questions, and there is no easy answer. That's why we would like to introduce you to our flexible dance machine, which is simple and fun. And you don't need to make any complicated choices or figure out any setups. All you need to do is feel the rhythm of yourself, of course, and mark on scale. How many dancers do you have in your team? How would you like to dance? And what kind of genre do you want? Or let's call it mood. And of course, at the end, save your choices. The dance machine will choose the ideal setup for you and your team. Simply follow the steps and dance, or work, of course. And at the end of the day, it will require less energy, and our goal is to create the most effortless workplace for humans. In time, it will learn your habits, like Spotify, offering you some new playlists to try out. You can like it or not, but it invites you to discover, which is really important. So, control your work environment and be aware, and don't let it control you. and then just dance. But first, let's figure out the moves.
Thank you, Dominika. So this is the presentation that we showed at Frame Awards in February. And since that time, our thinking has changed a bit, as Robert earlier introduced. So we imagine that in the future, the dance machine will be a complex solution that will watch over our well-being at work. But now we are here. And we believe that the first step is to build your self-awareness. During the pandemic, we were forced to work outside our office preset. And working from home for each of us was different. We had to ask ourselves how to create the space we need to do the job that we have. Luckily, we were there to discover what happened along the way. We collaborated with the research company Thiemann on their home working survey, which, as you see, totaled over 10,000 respondents so far. And based on what we learned, we adjusted further. So two findings that turned out to be important is that, first of all, conversations are better than interactions at home. And secondly, there's an impact of work setting that we have available, which differentiates our experience. So for example, people who have a separate workroom or office where they can control the space have a higher satisfaction level than those who don't have a specific location that they can dedicate to work. So we can proceed. And this is why we think that now it's more important than before even to find out what's good for us and how to create the space that we need.
We figured out that to make a first step on Orgatec, we need to create a learning experience. We would engage the user to set the right environment for work that he wants to do, like to concentrate or to do something creative or whatever else he chooses. The idea is for every participant to do the challenge twice. And why? Because the first time you do it on your own, when you need to decide about all the settings and parameters. Sounds complicated? Yes, we think it could be hard. The second time, the dance machine will help you. It will choose the right preset for you, for your mood and the goal that you want to achieve. All you need to do is just follow the steps. The choice is still there. You can still adjust if you need something. Yeah, exactly. Only if you need it. You don't have to think about it so much. So, do you feel a difference? We hope the answer is yes. At Orgatec, we would like to find out if we are right. So, for now, we have two questions to our experts. Firstly, we would like to build good presets, and for that, we need to get to know human brain a little bit better, to find out how can different spatial characteristics induce these desired mental states that are good for different work modalities. And secondly, we want to use Orgatec as our research playground to learn how can we use participatory methods of data collection. And finally, we would like to ask you, the audience, about your experience of home working as our third expert today. So what have you learned about yourself while working from home? Send us the answers to the address listed below, or feel free to share after the workshop. Let us know, because we are really curious how this experiment from Earth affected you and your work. For now, that's all from us, and we hope you want to share and that you want to dance with us. So I pass the voice to our first expert.
Well, first you will need to go by me.
Sorry.
Because I would like to introduce the experts to you, audience. So thanks Workplace Solutions. Thanks also for revisiting your initial concept due to the pandemic. Sounds like you're on a really exciting track. And well, I can tell you what I learned from working from home, which is I shouldn't do it. I can't concentrate. I'm at the office all the time. So I'm really curious what you and what further experts have to say about that. But first, let me introduce to you today's experts. I would like to welcome Beatriz Arantes. She is the manager of WorkSpace Futures group at Steelcase. She's a senior researcher specializing in the psychology of human emotions and behaviors and how they relate to work and work environments. And secondly, Dr. Ninela Ivanova. She is an innovation fellow at the Helen Hamlyn Centre for Design at the Royal College of Art. She is an interdisciplinary designer and researcher who co-creates with audiences to educate and inspire people towards innovation and collaboration on a global scale. So we're really excited to have you here. Let's move to the first question, and that is, how can different spatial characteristics induce a desired mental state to support a chosen work modality? I would like to introduce Beatriz Arantes to answer this question.
So thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this panel. I have a multi-part answer for these competitors. So just to start off by saying that this idea really resonated with me because we ourselves, when we were doing the research and developing the Flex collection at Steelcase for teams, based on observing expert design thinking teams, agile teams, and project teams, we knew that it would be much more difficult for novices to grasp intuitively how to use it. And we knew that it would require new teams to do more experimenting, and it would require more coaching to understand how to use the collection and its infinite permutations and combinations. So it's a really great idea to think about helping people identify the best settings for themselves. And I'm glad to see that you're not aiming to have machine learning by October, because with the experience that I've had with it, not only is machine learning complex and long and expensive to build the kind of data set that you need to make these kinds of automated predictions and adjustments, the fact is that in order for machines to learn, you need to teach them something. And so all of this begins at the heart of it with human learning. And people need to know what's best for themselves so that we can teach the machine to make those kinds of adjustments for us. So to answer your question, I'm going to break my answer down into 3 parts. First, I'm going to share with you directly your question about how space affects different work modalities and what we've learned from research. But next, I'm going to complicate those guidelines a little bit to tell you a little bit about the human variability factor, which means that we're all different. And so there's no hard and fast rules, and which requires us to really become much more self-aware as you are indicating in your prototype. And then finally, I'll give a recommendation for how you could run this prototype at Orgatec. Not that you have to do it that way, but I always find it easier to understand and translate abstract advice when it's given in a concrete format. So, so the first thing I wanted to share with you today is in terms of thinking about how people, which are the ways in which space can support different ways of thinking. Let's start by thinking about focus. We're really concerned sometimes about getting the right focus setting. And my colleague Caroline Kelly did a randomized cross-trial experiment where she observed the kinds of spaces that were most effective for people in order to get focus work done. And in this experiment, the significant results showed that it's much more effective to be in an enclosed environment. And the reason that we can ascribe to that is that when you're in an enclosed environment, you can use all of your cognitive energy and focus on the task, and you don't have to use it to self-monitor and to monitor your environment, which is, I don't have to worry about who's coming across the room and how they perceive me or how I have to behave. And so we can afford to use that energy on what we're doing. So that's something that you might want to take into account for your preset. However, on the flip side, if you're thinking more of doing creative work, what she found through this experiment was that an open plan environment was more conducive for creative associating different kinds of ideas. And the reason that we could ascribe to that is that we have seen in other types of research and research results that when you're trying to think creatively, it helps to have broader perspectives, to look farther, to have more kinds of stimulation. So that's a second thing that you might want to think about for your preset. And thirdly, when it comes to what if you want to rejuvenate your mind and recover energy and you're tired? You can look up our research on biophilia in the 360 magazine from Steelcase in an article called The Restoration Office, where we talk about the fact that sensorially rich environments, ones that stimulate your vision with different colors, with the things that have different textures that you can touch, all these things provide a richness that help engage your mind in a kind of more effortless fascination and mindfulness. So these are, if you're looking to help people recover, you might think about providing a preset that engages more themes from nature. That said, we really have to also consider the human variability piece of this. So, and what I mean by that is that one of the things that we have learned from the neuroscience of attention is that a key factor that allows us to pay attention has to do with how alert we are. It's this notion of physiological arousal. So when, and so just to put it very plainly, if you're trying to talk to someone and they're falling asleep, you know that they're not absorbing anything that you're saying. And on the other extreme, if someone's super agitated and won't stop moving and they're rocking in their chair, you also start to have doubts as to whether they're actually paying attention to what you're saying. And so what we need for people to be effective is to be in that optimal middle zone of attention. So, what that means is that if you're a little bit sleepy and tired, it would be good to raise a bit the stimulation, have people around, have a little bit more noise to keep you alert and on your toes. On the other hand, if you're feeling very agitated or very excited, it's probably good to tone down that stimulation and thinking about sound and light and things like that. How do you help calm and soothe the nerves? And all of this gets a little bit more complicated when you take into account that, okay, everyone has a different level of sensitivity. So for someone, something that is very loud and obnoxious is maybe not as impactful to someone else. So we're all different individually, but we're also going to be impacted differently depending on circumstantial issues, such as, did I get enough sleep last night? Am I stressed out about something happening in my life? What just happened in my last meeting? All those things are going to impact your current state and what it's going to take for you to be effective getting to the next state. So this is all to say that you are absolutely correct that self-awareness is the key to this. And it goes into this, the direction of what Daniel Goleman explains in his theory about emotional intelligence, is that in order for us to be able to self-influence, that is, to get ourselves from one state to another, we also need greater self-awareness. So, and we could call this maybe spatial fluency. I have seen throughout the years that for people who have never had the opportunity to experiment with different places, to ask themselves the question, this is the task I want to do, what is the best environment for me to do it in? If they've been told for years that they have to do their work sitting at a desk with a chair in front of their computer, and they don't have a choice about what to do in which situation, when we ask them to imagine their ideal environment for a brainstorm session or for strategic thinking or for getting focus work done, they're not able to articulate it. So that's why I find that the presets idea are really good concept that you developed. And I can kind of compare that to my experience moving to France, where I knew just of a few different kinds of cheeses, and then I go to the French market, where your regular market, and in front of you there are 60 different types of cheeses, and I'm just completely overwhelmed by how people are able to say, I want 200 grams of this, I want half of that, and I just had no idea how on earth do they know what they like. But it helped that over the years, I had curated experiences where I went to somebody's house or ordered a cheese plate at a restaurant, and people explained to me the different ones and told me which order to try them in. So the opportunity to experiment things in a much more limited choice is helpful for people who are novices and need to build up that experience and to over time be able to learn what they like. It's like learning a language. You start with the alphabet, you start with some simple sentences to get basic needs across, and over time you're able to learn more grammar and express yourself more fluently. And that's why I'm talking about this in terms of spatial fluency. So get to the part where I give recommendations for what your prototype could look like. I really like your dials. I like this idea that people are going to set their different settings. And so this is what I could envision. What if you had a wall where each parameter was represented by a dial, a very visible dial, time of day, light color, light intensity, sound level, volume level, and the furniture arrangement. You have this set up on a wall visibly, and you take a participant and you offer them, you assign them a task, whether it's more of a routine focus task or something more creative and open-ended, and then you ask them to try and do those settings, to adjust the settings. You get a couple of minutes for that, and at the same time, there's someone on the opposite wall with their back turned to them who has the identical set of dials doing the same thing. And after a couple of minutes, the two of them have to come together and negotiate and agree on and explain to each other why they chose those settings, and then they have to negotiate which settings are going to be the ones that they're both going to use for that task. And the reason I suggest having two people is that sometimes it's really hard for us when we're confronted in a new situation with things that we're not familiar with. It's hard to vocalize or to understand what we're experiencing without vocalizing it. And so having that conversation can be something that not only helps the person articulate their needs and why they need it and realize it's not the same for everyone, they also realize that from speaking to the other person that not everyone feels the same way and has the exact same needs. And finally, since this is something that would take a little bit of time, and so not everyone would be able to get to do it, another way that you can scale this experience is by handing out to the audience a paper version of those dials where they mark their own, what they would prefer. And so that way they get to participate by reflecting, and they also get the benefit of the dialogue between the two participants, which will run with their own internal dialogue of how interesting, this isn't the same for me. So that's what I wanted to share, and I'm excited to hear what our other expert has to say.
Well, thanks, Beatriz. Before going to the other expert, I want to thank you for being so elaborate in your answer. And I would like to ask the team of Workplace Solutions whether this has sparked any further questions.
So I don't know if girls, do you have any question? Because for me, it's like, thank you very much for confirming that we are right, because we as designers, sometimes we more feel with our intuition that we are right. And based on our experience, we decide to create this kind of concept. And you give us energy to push it further. And I really love this idea about starting with the alphabet, because we have trouble with alphabet in a work environment, like very simple things. We really don't know what we like. And I feel like we should draw more attention to build this self-awareness in people, because it will affect both work and personal life, I think. And this affection will be positive for sure for them. So thank you for that. And what else? I have one question, because I'm not sure if this is really the best idea to scale the experience, because I'm afraid if people are able to create a space with objects which are not in a human scale. Like, because we as architects or designers, we can imagine and we can work with models which are in different scales. But I'm afraid if, you know, participants from Orgatec, if they will be able to create what really they would like to create, if they can compare the scales. I'm a bit afraid of that.
But if I understand correctly, this is more of a worksheet type of scaling. So for the audience, and the interaction is a bit different there. So not really model based. I don't know, Beatriz, if you would like to respond, then do go on. I have a question, a small one as well.
Well, just in terms of the scale, for the people going through the experience in the room, you can still have the furniture in the room and then have it represented by small cutouts for them to play with. And I don't know if there's a way for you to do those with magnets or, you know, with small reproductions. And yes, in fact, for the audience, I would stick to maybe just having maybe a square where they can sketch out quickly how they would arrange things. I think if they can see it in the human scale, they'll be able to understand it and reproduce it with a quick sketch.
Okay.
So this is an idea of creating a stage, basically, of people participating.
Exactly.
So Ula?
Okay, so my question is more about the dynamic of the inner and outer world that you described, which for us, I think is very interesting, and how to incorporate this point of view and knowledge of each person to the dials. And for me, my question would be, do you think that it would help or improve this learning experience if we would also factor in the feelings and ask people, how are you today? Are you tired? Are you agitated? And could this be also a parameter to spark the conversation, which I also think is a great idea for us?
I think that's great. I wonder if then what you can do in terms of creating this event, let's say that you'll be doing this mini event regularly over Orgatec, maybe every hour. You know that they can come and see this experience. I would set up a questionnaire or just a quick set of questions that once the two people have discussed among themselves what their dial preferences are, you can ask them questions that the audience can also reflect for themselves. Are you a morning person? Are you a late night owl kind of person? Might any of your choices have to do with how rested you feel this morning? Or how have you been feeling lately? I think that's great. What are some questions that you might bring to get people to think more about how their state is influencing their environmental preferences?
Thank you, Beatriz, and thank you for your additional questions, Team WorkSpace Solutions. I'd like to move on to our next expert, and I'll bring to the forefront the question that you have for her, which is, how can we use participatory methods of data collection to develop a user-centric solution for the office environment? And I'd like to give the stage to Ninela Ivanova.
Thank you, Robert. I will just share my screen. So firstly, thank you to WorkSpace Solutions for inviting me to be their expert on this panel. And thank you, Orgatec, for today's session as well, and for organizing this. For me, this is quite an exciting opportunity to participate for two reasons. First, professionally, but on a personal note, I'm also a dancer. So I completely relate on a personal level to the proposition of WorkSpace Solution and the idea that to create agility, we need some kind of structure. We need to build a new language, understanding, and tools for self-expression for different people to become part of that solution. I am an innovation fellow, as you said, at the Helen Hamlyn Centre for Design at London's Royal College of Art, which you can see on screen. It's a lovely day in London, albeit we're not there physically today. And I would like to address today's question around participatory method by saying why this is important to ask this question. And for me, that's really the purpose of the question is to ensure that the solutions that we create are truly people-centered. They are focused not only on the needs of the people we're designing for, but also which as designers we can easily imagine through experience, but also to ensure that aspirations, hopes for that space are also included in that process. So today I will talk about the practice or part of the practice of the Helen Hamlyn Centre, which is a centre for inclusive design. And that's really about creating design processes, tools, solutions that center around the people who are diverse. So when we talk about agility, which is hard, who are those people, you know, across ages, across gender, across color. And I think in this day and age, this is ever more important. So inclusive design as a term was coined at the Helen Hamlyn Centre for Design in 1994 by the then director Roger Coleman. And later, this is the definition by the UK government, which is including the needs of the widest number of people in our design. And we use participatory methods within that to enable this. And I will give you a very, very simple example of why this is important. So this is a lady who is struggling to turn on her TV to watch the news. And because this was a recurring event, she actually thought the news, the amount of news has just ran out, and she was unable to have access to it. Now, the problem in this case is not to do with the person. And I think I chose this example because it really speaks to the question of the day, which is about choice and control. So what she's facing is these three remote controls with multiple buttons. And I personally would always struggle with one remote control, let alone three. So the design researcher who was working this, let's call it design intervention, that would cover the unnecessary buttons and exclude only the ones that she needed to turn on the TV with very simple instructions. We're talking about instruction and direction today of use. And this is what happened when they gave it back to her.
And after a second, that's right, that's right.
Day on Saturday. Well, Ben Brown is in Johannesburg for a snack.
And so we haven't, she wasn't bribed to give that reaction. But this is what really we're designing for, is that sense of delight, of ease, of aspiration. And I think that is truly reflected in the proposition of workplace solutions. And to achieve that, we have to work people to solve or to identify the real problems and needs, and not with design personas, which are commonly used within design processes and innovation. So we always ask, who are those people who we are designing for or with? You have to be able to name them and include them in the process. And I think the fair that's coming up would be a fantastic way to engage people in that way. Inclusive design also has the power to be predictive. So I will show you two case studies from the Helen Hamlyn Centre, which bring this topic back to workplace design. And they were from 2009 and from 2015, but the questions that were addressed there are still relevant today. So the first one is called Space for Thought. And it was looking at knowledge workers, of how mobile they are. So there's more agility required of them, simply in terms of their processes, their approaches to work, and the nature of their work. To be knowledge workers, that implies that they're probably better educated, highly skilled, they've accumulated experience over time. So they may be older and therefore have different sensory requirements of the environment. So before designing for them, Catherine Green, who was the researcher on the project, decided to use different participatory methods to understand more about these knowledge workers. So, of course, that included stakeholder interviews, ethnographic observations, so going into those places, on-site visits to observe how they work, but also very, very simple participatory tool. And I love the of Beatriz from the previous talk about how you can simply test ideas and propositions. So this was one such tool. It is literally a square on a blank sheet of paper with a simple question: how do you use your office? And the aim there was to map the mobility of workers who are within the same space in relation to that space. So their navigation patterns, how much time they spend in one spot, whether they move about at all. And from that, she observed that there's different patterns of behavior. Needless to say, people were enthusiastic and scribbling all over the place. But she came up with 4 distinct typologies and also needs associated with these type of workers. And I'm sure you can recognize these within your colleagues. So the first one is the anchor, who is very much desk-based. I think in the current reality, we are all anchors. Unfortunately, we hope that won't last for too long. But for those people, comfort is incredibly important if you're having to be stationary for a long time. The connector, they're within the building, but they move around a lot. You can rarely find them at their desk. They're always in team meetings or chatting to someone from the other department and bringing that knowledge back into their team. So those guys would need more adaptable types of furniture or environment. Probably the gas machine would be their favorite invention of all kinds. The gatherer is a person who spends some time in the office. That might be your consultant, but they're also often out of the office. So they need a more welcoming alternative. They come back to the workplace and a sort of recognition that they're also part of that organization, not a missing presence. The navigator is somebody like a salesperson who is often not in the office. And they would be the people who have a hot desking space allocated for them. So the need there was identified as an alternative solution to a hot desk, which is more welcoming and personalizable on one way or the other. The thing that they all agreed on was the need for concentration, but that would vary again between the types. So I guess for me, the question here in relation to the proposition of workplace solutions is what are the types of dances that may be using your dance machine, you know, looking at how you train dance to somebody who is a complete novice, to then come experimenters, to improvise and to express freely to music, you know, what would be those stages and different needs of the dance machine. The next case study is looking at workplace and well-being. And the question there was, how do we design a workplace to cater for people's well-being? And in that, what is included is functional needs, so immediate needs, as well as psychological needs, which I think is the question of the day. And when this project was set up, it was against the backdrop of data that 23 million working days are lost in the UK because of what would be termed well-being deficit. So essentially, people not working because they're feeling unwell, they're emotionally stressed, or whatever condition might be, that's resulting from our ill-managed work or life relationship. And especially when we're moving, we have this thing now, work-life blend rather than a balance. So this was a three-phase research. The first phase was a scoping study of 4 organizations, and in that, again, participatory methods such as stakeholder interviews, workshops, and ethnographic observation. And what transpired from that was the need for a sense of control. And so the second phase of that project was looking at, okay, if we enable people to have a degree of control, whether that would really impact well-being. So they set up a participatory experiment. In this type of inclusive design, we'll often be looking at qualitative data, but again, I think I would always advocate for a blend between qualitative and quantitative data. So through workshops and a designed engagement, they had 3 groups. The first group was given a high level of control in how they wanted to design their environment. The second group, a lower level of control, so they could have some intervention into their workplace. And the third group was a control group, so they had no level of control whatsoever. And what came up through this was that irrespective of the level of intervention, so high or low, participants reported an improved well-being. So that points to the fact that it may be enough just to have a say, part of the engagement, to feel included towards that solution. So what resulted from this, which was then tested in phase 3, was this conceptual model of workplace well-being, which had at its heart the idea that the organizational purpose, and in today's reality, we talk a lot about purpose in business, needs to be aligned with the individual needs, both functional and psychological. And again, within that, you can have complete alignment, so the organization supports both. Partial, where it's one, like let's say either functional needs, but not the psychological needs, and a complete misalignment. So looking at the different directions and different priorities, essentially. From this, there was an evaluation toolkit developed. The workplace essentially was a set of questions where participants self-reported, so it's driven by the workers, not by the organization, and the evaluation matrix, which would highlight where on that scale the needs were met and also opportunities for further development. And I'm coming to the end of my presentation, but I'd like to leave you with a few resources. The Helen Hamlyn Centre for Design, of course, website, you can see a lot of the previous work much of which is around workplace design, which was led by Professor Jeremy Marston, who is the Helen Hamlyn Chair for Design, and he also runs WorkTec Academy. And through there, you can get to the Helen Hamlyn archive, which you see on the bottom right-hand corner, where you can sort and look at the workplace-related projects. We also have a website called designingwithpeople.org, where you can learn about participatory methods, toolkits, that's all free to access, and resources, and the Innovating with People book. And I would like to end on answering the third question of workplace solutions, which is what I have learned about my habits or myself during this time, and that's kindness, and more particularly kindness with the self. So that is self-empathy, which I think relates closely to your idea of self-awareness and inspiring that through Dance Machine. Thank you
very much. Thank you very much, Ninela. Very insightful. I can imagine that this has sparked more questions from Team Workplace Solutions.
So first, maybe I would like to agree with you that sometimes choice could be a nightmare for people. And that's why we draw attention to this topic, that maybe we create really perfect, flexible, agile furniture and spaces. But sometimes I feel like we forget about people inside who really have struggle inside this work environment, because they really have to choose during the day, and then they really have to adjust the space, and they spend a lot of energy doing this, and that's why they cannot focus. And you were also telling about the need for concentration. It's really hard to concentrate when constantly you have to adjust the space. So I think we think very similar to about this topic. And right now, I don't have a question, to be honest. I'm more like in a state that I have to think more about this topics which you mentioned. But maybe Ula's got a question. I see her smile, so I know that she's got a question.
I do. For me, I think that the example with this older lady was very impactful in terms of what we are trying to achieve. And thank you for showing us such a picture that really paints our intentions well. What I found, something that's maybe a topic to talk about a bit more, is this aspect where we had the anchor, the connector, gatherer, and navigator. Because I had an impression that in this matrix, we are niched down a bit to this connector role, which also is very common now in the workspaces and amongst knowledge workers, although the anchor role is still very relevant. And I wonder what you think, Ninela, is this the case? So are we, can this solution also aid gatherers, navigators, or anchors? For me, I see it more specialized to the teams, and maybe for the anchor as a way of having that a little bit of control.
It's a very good question. Thank you, Ula. And I'm not sure I have a definite answer. I think my answer would be, would go back to what I'm advocating for, which is you need to actually find out who those people are, you know, who you are designing for, and include them into what you're proposing, because these are typologies that came through 4 different organizations within London, you know, across India. But, you know, who is the dance machine for? Is it for a specific sector? What are the levels, or who will be actually making the decisions? So my answer would be to engage them, and maybe we'll come up with different typologies. You know, I think typologies are there to be dispelled as well. I mean, if we're looking at these 4, I think any of those would have would take pleasure and would like to engage in having some kind of personalization or input. I think when we talked about their sense of control is one of the things that was coming up. But how do we enable them and how do you facilitate? I think that's what the experiment Beatriz proposed was pointing to. How do you negotiate then? I think that's a key question that we're asking. How do you negotiate solution? And I think what's exciting about the metaphor of the dance floor is that you're orchestrating a dance floor in a way. So including the people in that process would help you answer some of those questions.
I think that at Orgatec, as we asked earlier, Beatriz, about this inner and outer world dynamic, this is another dynamic that we probably should include in the questionnaire, which is the role and the specific tasks that each of the participants has to perform daily. Because if we take into account agility and it's connected to mobility very strongly, then we can see the gatherer and navigator role also having their say here, which is not probably the user who comes to mind, but as you said, that using these participatory methods, it would be interesting to see which parts of the solutions are of value to them, if any.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I also had a thought because you were talking that the sense of control is the major thing for the well-being at work, and we agree with you because we are trying to give control to the user, but on the other hand, we have these limited choices that, you know, when you have too much choice, you get lost and you don't know what you need anymore. So I think that's the question for us, actually, to find balance between sense of control and limiting choices and giving only good choices to the user in a way.
Well, to answer that, I probably have to refer off Beatriz's proposition and also your initial idea of using Orgatec as a way of learning and kind of being experience. The problem is not with the fact that there's myriad of options. As living beings, we're used to making options. I would making choice from options or choosing. It's how you educate about those options and how you train in that engagement or in the choice making process. I think that's where Dance Machine and the dials and all of this will come in.
I'm writing this down. This is maybe why we have a minute of silence, because educating by making a process out of the choice, a learning process for the participants is, I think, for us, a direction that we wanted to go, but also a very important takeaway from both of your inputs, Ninela and Beatriz.
Well, you're taking notes, Ola, but actually there will be a recording available probably Thursday this week. So if you missed something, you can go back, watch the recording, and there's no need to take further notes. That's also true for the audience. If you would like to have a look back, a recording will be available later this week. I'd like to go to one last issue or one last question, either from Workplace Solutions or from Ninela or Beatriz.
So you suggest that we still get time for
one last question?
Okay.
I think that our question would be actually to you, Robert, and it would be what you have learned during this period of working from home about yourself.
Well, as I said before, I've learned that for me it is virtually impossible to work from home, and that has to do with my homemates. During lockdown, which was from half March until I think end of May in the Netherlands. My two daughters and my wife were at home, two daughters aged 4 and 16, so various ages. They were all at home. And one daughter was taking virtual school classes and dancing classes even. That's true. So we, at a certain moment, we had to leave the living room and, well, go somewhere else. And the youngest daughter was not really enjoying school classes virtually. And then my wife was at home taking care of the youngest. So for me, it was virtually impossible to escape my, my homemates. There was always something going on. So I couldn't be in control, so to say. And that's why I decided after 1 week of trying to make this work to simply go back to the office. And for 1 week, I was the only one, and I've worked in a really good way because I could focus as much as I wanted. Then more people came in, and I like that. I like people to be at the office, so you have somebody to talk to and exchange ideas with and collaborate with. But I have learned actually that too many people in the office, and this might be news for my team, is not a good thing because we work in an open plan space. So we are in the exact same space, all of us, and all of us means if everybody's here, 15 people, so 1-5, that's actually not a lot, but for one space, it is a lot. So there is little control for people to set the conditions as they would like them to be. So when I discovered this, I asked my team the question, well, going forward in the autumn or next year, how would you see yourself working? Would you prefer to work from home or would you prefer to work from the office? And almost 90% said they would like to work 50% from home and 50% from the office. At the office, they would like to socialize, connect with team members, hang out, exchange ideas. At home, they would like to be for the actual work, so to focus, so to say. This was what I learned during lockdown.
That's very interesting and also very representative of the research results we received during the past couple of months. I think that in this smaller group, you experience all of the things which happen at a larger scale, also on multi-thousand employee companies at the same time. And for us, for example, we also completed a questionnaire for between ourselves. So that's a team of about 30 people. And we already know that only about 20% want to work from the office the majority of the time. And the rest, they also want to divide their time between home and office, but with more time on the office side. We also had a move to a space which is half the size. And now we're going back there more or less structured, and we're looking for the next model which will come after this temporary one. And I think that the dance machine also helps us with our realizations for our own company.
Well, going forward, it would be interesting to learn how many people still would like to work from home in about a year from now. So maybe at that time, the situation will be totally different and people will be longing for a communal place and they would like to escape their home. That would be interesting to see how that will evolve, those needs for space. I think going forward for your team, Workplace Solutions, that it would be interesting to see if you could create some kind of a dance machine for people working from home. So if it is true that so many people like to work from home and they are not aware of what they need in order to perform, they indeed need to become more self-aware. I think that's a very good question that people need to look into. But then the following question should be, okay, so you're tired. What do you need to do? Okay, so you want to focus. What does that require from your home space? I think a manual in regard of that would be beneficial to millions and millions of people trying to make home work as an office. Having said this, I would like to wrap up this conversation. I would like to thank the experts, Ninela and Beatriz, for being so elaborate and insightful when it comes to sharing their experience and their knowledge regarding the workplace. And I would like to thank Ula, Alexandra, and Dominika from WorkSpace Solutions for their ideas, for their presentations, and for the work they've put into their concept already. I know you will be continuing your project, and next stage is a presentation at Orgatec. I hope we will see the birth of a dancing machine at Orgatec. All I can say for now is that what it looks like is that the fair will actually take place. So there will be an in-person event in Cologne in October. How many people will be admitted to the fair? How many people actually show up? That's the next question. But I think at that time in October, we will all be longing to go to a physical event, and we will be kind of bored by looking at our screens all the time to be in close contact to people. I mean, it's very interesting, but I'm sure that you have all heard of, maybe also experienced, the so-called Zoom fatigue. So once again, thank you all for being with us today. You can watch a recording of this session later this week. And let me close today's meeting with the announcement of the next one that will take place this week, Thursday, the 25th of June, 4 o'clock sharp, Central European time. And that will be about inclusive design. As Ninela pointed out, to be inclusive as a designer is to include the needs of the widest number of people in your design. To be inclusive as an industry would also be including the widest number of people, regardless of age, sex, color, physical appearances, and whatsoever. But that is very questionable, whether this happens in the interior design industry. So we have compiled a panel that will discuss how to create more diversity in the interior design industry. This Thursday, 4 o'clock sharp, Frame Live, all inclusive. I hope to see you there again. To the team at WorkSpace Solutions, I say good luck. And I hope to see you in October in Cologne. Experts of today, thank you very much again. Audience, thank you for being with us. See you back anytime soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you for this workshop.
Yeah, and thank you, Beatriz. It was really helpful. We really appreciate your advices and sharing your knowledge with us.
It's really a pleasure. Thank you for including me.